As the Madam Director stood up and went to the door, she turned around and paused. "By the way, my name is Selina Salem. Because of the Alliance customs, I've never been able to tell you my name. But there's something special about you, and I want you to know it. I'm tired of feeling captive to the influence and power of the Alliance. Meeting you reminded me of the importance of justice and true love. Who knows? Maybe one day you could take me away from here?" Before Kevin could respond, Selina gave a soft sigh. "I have to hurry back to my room. If anyone found out that I slept here, we'd both be in a lot of trouble." Kevin didn't speak, he just nodded his head. After Selina left, Kevin could still smell her perfume on the pillow. He made up his mind to develop his strength so that he could take her and anyone else who wanted freedom away from the Alliance as soon as possible. But right now, neither of them was powerful enough to take that kind of step, not against such a formidable organization. After a few hours, Kevin arrived in New York City. The hospital was full of Williams family members. There were also a lot of influential politicians and members of the business world who were there to visit with Randall Williams, Kevin's grandfather. But everyone was still puzzled about how he'd suddenly fallen ill. As Kevin had found out through his exposure to herbal medicines, someone with his grandfather's level of development should be able to fight off many fatal diseases. It seems that he had probably been poisoned, not in a single dose, but over a long period of time. Over the course of the previous month, Randall had felt more and more tired as the level of poison had increased in his body. Looked like nobody could save him now. At first, Thomas had decided to keep the news of Randall's illness a secret. He was just too important a figure in New York, and if people knew that he'd been poisoned, it would have hurt the Williams family. Grandpa Williams lay in his hospital bed, very lethargic and looking gaunt. His skin was an odd bluish-purple color. All the senior members of the Williams family were at his bedside looking extremely somber. They would be lost without Randall. "Thomas, did you call Kevin?" Randall asked weakly. "Don't worry, Father. I've told him," Thomas replied hesitantly. But he didn't tell the poor sick man that although Kevin hadn't refused, he hadn't agreed either. "Good." Grandpa Williams nodded his head lightly. Even though Kevin had angered the entire family, he was still his grandson after all, and he still wanted to see him before he died. "I don't understand, Dad. Why did you call Kevin to come here? He's been banished from the family." Laura couldn't help wondering. Monty Aspinwall and Ethan Williams were standing by the window. They didn't understand why Grandpa had asked for Kevin to come to his bedside either. Was he going to make out a will? "Let's change the subject, Laura. Dad wants to see his grandson one last time. Who are we to stop him?" Thomas Williams frowned as he scolded his wife. As for Randall's poisoning, Thomas had a few suspicions, but since he still didn't have any evidence, he kept acting like he was clueless. As soon as Kevin entered the hospital, he attracted a lot of attention. But he wasn't in the mood to say hello to anyone. He stopped by the front desk to ask which room his grandfather was in, and then he walked up the stairs. Some of the people who were waiting in the lobby recognized him and started to whisper to each other. They believed all the lies that had been spread about what he'd done to the family and how he'd been ostracized. "What's he doing here?" they were all wondering. As soon as Kevin stepped out of the stairwell on the 4th floor, he was spotted by a lot of the senior members of the Williams family, who were standing around in the corridor. "Kevin, you have a lot of nerve coming here," one of his relatives sneered. "Get out of here right now," another one shouted. It certainly didn't look like a warm family reunion. They made a lot of noise insulting Kevin and telling him to get out. "Hey, Uncle Thomas called and asked me to come. I'm here to see my grandfather, not you." Kevin wasn't afraid to tell them off. When he walked into Grandpa's room, everyone's eyes were riveted on him. His Aunt Lori even tried to block him from entering the room. "You're not wanted here. Why don't you head back to your wife in Chicago?" "My mother's right. Get out of here right now, Kevin. My grandfather doesn't want to see you." Ethan snarled at him. Of course, Ethan didn't want Kevin to come into the room. Since Randall Williams didn't have a will, if Kevin came back, that meant dividing his estate up even more and less money for Ethan.
What are you all shouting about? Get out of the way. I invited Kevin here myself.
Thomas walked over to them with a scowl on his face. Are you kidding? Do you know how angry your father will get when he sees this? Laura was furious with her husband. How could he bring Kevin back just when they were about to inherit the family's wealth? This was a disaster.
I'm not kidding at all. In spite of everything, Kevin is a member of the Williams family. It's only right for him to see his grandfather one last time.
Thomas shut her down right away. Then he looked at his nephew and sighed heavily.
Grandpa isn't awake right now. Have a seat at his bedside and wait for him to wake up again.
Kevin nodded his head in agreement and walked over to the bed.
Step outside with me.
Thomas glared at Laura and the two of them left the room. Monty and Ethan clenched their fists as they stared at Kevin. But they both had different feelings towards him. Ethan's eyes were full of contempt while Monty's were full of resentment. Thomas and Laura walked all the way down the hall to the stairwell. What are you calling me out here for? Laura was in a very miserable mood. Thomas leaned in close to his wife and growled, Are you nuts? What do you mean? I think you're crazy for inviting Kevin here right now. Her eyes were burning with anger.
You're the crazy one, Thomas shouted. Don't you realize Dad was poisoned?
Laura was stunned when she heard this, and Thomas could see the panic in her eyes. What do you mean? How could he have been poisoned when he's been shut away in seclusion for so many years? Laura replied to him sternly.
Maybe you haven't been in direct contact with Dad all these years, but you're the one who plans everything in the family.
Thomas hesitated for a moment before he got to the point.
I had my suspicions, but when Kevin showed up in the room, you gave away some clues.
Laura didn't say anything to refute her husband's accusation. She just let Thomas keep talking.
Tell me why you did it, Laura.
Thomas gritted his teeth and asked her.
The Williams family has treated you well all these years. How could you do such a heartless thing?
Ha! Laura suddenly laughed. How can you ask me something like that? Okay, I'll tell you the truth. Why should I hide it anymore? Thomas, don't you ever feel like you're not a real man? She paused for a moment to let that sink in. You're obviously senior to Kevin, but you couldn't hold a candle to him. If I didn't find a way to drive him out of the family, there's no way you'd be able to take over after your father died. If I hadn't arranged for Hannah to disappear, how else could I keep Kevin from returning to our family? Don't you realize that Randall loves his grandson too much to not welcome him back into the fold?
So it's true then.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.